Hi, Morgan.
Hi.
Thank you so much for helping my project.
Absolutely.
Could you say a few words about yourself?
Sure. My name is Morgan Musso. I currently am a contractor over at Johnson Space Center. I work with center operations with the geographic information systems for the center.
That's amazing. And someday you'll be doing that for the moon and Mars and other planetary bodies.
Hopefully. That's the dream for sure.
Astronaut whips out their iPad and it's like, how do I get there? And like, they're using your app.
I would love that.
That'd be fantastic. What got you interested in space?
Well, I've always had a passion with space exploration when I was a child. I remember, this is kind of aging me a little bit on the younger side, where I remember in kindergarten, Apollo 13 came out.
Mm-hmm.
And it was such a remarkable movie at the time. And I remember that in my class, we had an ability to like present a movie that we wanted to share with the rest of the class, and that was the one I chose for myself. And so I've always had a fondness of space exploration, even when I was such a child. So actually being able to be part of the Center's family and the agency has been a dream come true for sure.
Have you been able to track back like the spark that created interest to like some event or meeting somebody or somebody that you know? I mean,
I would say so. The movie started, but then beyond that, I remember New Year's Eve of New Year's Day of 1998. I came from San Antonio, Texas, and I remember my parents drove us New Year's Day to the visitor center at Johnson Space Center.
okay.
And I remember spending a whole day exploring around, and at that time I want to make sure I'm remembering this correctly since it's been a while, but I do remember seeing the Saturn V rocket outside
Before they built
the building around it.
Okay.
Yes. But I remember seeing it, and I remember going around the visitor center, seeing the videos, and there was just this aura of awe about it that just captivated me ever since I was a child. And that was kind of that spark right there that really fueled my passion for the rest of my life. And I remember when I first got the job offer for the contract position that I'm in right now, I remember going back to the visitor center again, and I just remember that same feeling that I had when I was a child. And I was like, okay, it's still there.
That is awesome. I normally ask people, did you know that we're going back to the moon? But that's kind of a wasted question. But I could ask you, when did it become real to you that we're actually going back to the moon this time?
I think for me, since I've been on part of the program for a couple of years, for the agency, I should say, I've always known about, the Orion program. And then before that, the beginning workings of Constellation and Aries as well. But I think for me, I remember I was away for business at Langley, and the rollout was happening for Artemis 1.
Okay.
And when we started seeing the videos coming from the day of the rollout to the pad, that's when it was like, we're going back. That was the moment for me that I decided, okay, this is real. This is no longer theoretical. The rocket's on the pad right now.
And this is like the fall of 2022.
Correct.
Type thing. And then we saw the test flight, and that all worked out.
It was amazing to actually see the test flight. I definitely was one of the ones that actually, registered so I could have my name on the little data drive that was on the capsule and everything. And just to say, like, yeah, even though, my role is more on the center operation side, it's just, it feels, remarkable to be part of the team as, we're going through the Artemis generation right now.
Now, I do ask a lot of people, did you know that we're going back to the moon? And I would say about 80% of them say no. So out of all your family and friends, are they like aware that we're going back to the moon, or do you think?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
So, because I will talk my ear off about it and everything. And I try to, one big thing is a lot of my friends that I have are also big space nerds, and I gotta say a lot of them have been jealous about the fact that even though it's a small role, I'm still part of the agency in some particular part. And so for my immediate family and my immediate friends, they're very well aware, they're very well versed on it, but when I start branching out to more acquaintances and more people beyond that, I have noticed that people will start asking the same questions of why are we going back? Or what's the purpose of the SLS? Or what's the purpose of NASA doing this if we have private companies doing this? And a lot of times it takes me back of like, well, just because, you know, a private company can do it, why is it that should stop us from doing it too? And I always found it like hard to answer questions when I'm always approached with those questions, if that makes sense.
It does, absolutely. I've gotten lots of those myself. But I guess to the question of why are we going back to the moon, do you have like your favorite answer, or have you found something that works?
For me, going back to the moon, I like to think of it in the terms of history. And Artemis 2 is very analogous to, in my opinion, Apollo 8. And it's really interesting in not just Apollo 8, but if you also look at the the position that our country is right now, you can strike a lot of similarities between now and 1968, when Apollo 8 first went to circumnavigate the moon. And you know the DNC was held in Chicago both times.
Oh wow.
There were, if you look at the history, there was also in 1968 there were assassination attempts, or actual assassination of political candidates. And so there's a strong parallel, not just with the mission itself, but just kind of like where we're at. And I remember when Apollo 8 happened, there was a very important picture that was taken, and it was the Earthrise, the very iconic picture. For the first time, you see the curvature of the moon, and above it, the Earth. And it was the very first time that humanity had a picture where you saw the entire existence and history of humanity besides three people behind the lens. And a lot of people have attributed in history that one picture of people starting to realize kind of the fragility of like the Earth that we have. And after that, there was a lot of initiatives for like the passing of the Marine Mammal Endangered Species Act, or like the Marine Mammals Act and the Endangered Species Act, the Clean Water Act, the Clean Air Act. There was a huge momentum of conservation. And I remember that a lot of people have just attributed it to the fact that we had that picture. And there was just something about, seeing humanity in a certain perspective that we've never seen before that was so important. And to me, sometimes humans, us as people, we can kind of lose that fact, especially in the age of technology. Like everything is like super light speed right now. And I think that, going out there on a kind of a philosophical point of view a little bit is, kind of revisiting that. Kind of revisiting, it's like, hey, these are achievements that we have done. This is our home right here. And then also, not only are we revisiting that, but we want to go beyond and explore Mars. And I think that there's something about the human endeavor for exploration and the need for exploration. We always have the stories in history about like the Lewis and Clark or the Cook expeditions, about explorers going out and learning new things. And when we're presented with challenges, we learn to solve those challenges. And that's when we start introducing spin-offs of technology. And from the Apollo program, we had so many spin-offs that we take for granted that are now part of our everyday lives. The use of the internet and cellular technology and radio wave, like how we use communication these days. A lot of the base groundwork was done through the space program. And, I think going back, we're trying new challenges. We're exploring new areas that we have never tried before, and we're going to answer new questions. And it's overall going to be a net positive for humanity.
And I think you're totally right. One of the biggest things we'll get out of this is perspective. More people. I mean, there's a difference between seeing the Grand Canyon, pictures of the Grand Canyon, and actually seeing the Grand Canyon.
Correct. And I will tell you that pictures do not do it justice. When I've actually been out on the South Rim and looking out of it, out and just seeing the canyon as a whole, as a scope, there's a certain power to it when you actually get to see it. And I think that for us, we have rovers and we have satellites that have taken these pictures of these heavenly bodies beyond Earth, but actually going there in person, physically seeing and collecting samples and everything, I think that it's a whole different dimension. And I think it's an important dimension for us to explore.
And when you think about where it might lead us, if you were to think out not just like 10 years, 50 years, but an enormously long time, like 200 years, do you see us having people live, like attending Rice on the moon and Mars and that type of thing? Or do you think we're still only on the Earth and doing these little trips?
It's hard to say because 100 years ago today, we were still using cloth as our main fabric for aircraft. If we, like back in, we were using biplanes and probably the modern aircraft 100 years ago today, the early 1920s was probably going like 200 miles an hour. And now we have landed man on the moon in 100 years, and now we're going back and we're planning on going to Mars and beyond. That's 1 century. So when we're talking 2 centuries ahead, it's hard to really say where we're going to be as a society, for sure. Because, 200 years ago, you were talking about 1820. And, I mean, that's pre-Civil War. Country was only a few decades old at the time. And so, very stark difference of where we are today than where they were. And so, I think it could very well be a possibility.
I know, it's amazing to think like 200 years ago, we didn't even have the way to record sound, and now you can't get away from it.
That's correct. And it's amazing because, I actually had a conversation about this where, 100 years ago, people could not hear their own voice.
Wow.
Brought back to them, right?
Right.
Because, the first audio recordings, we take it for granted, we can hear ourselves, we can record our voice and play it back, but only for a century have we been able to do that, like listen to ourselves from an outside perspective. And that's kind of like if you look at the entire history of humanity, only in the last century we've been able to do that. And it's an aspect that I think people overlook, just how far we have gone.
I think it's amazing, like in the JFK speech that he gave at Rice, he says if you were to take all of human history and, I think it was like 50 years or 100 years, and he like kind of talks about some milestones. So that's kind of a good like foundation to build on for going back to the moon.
Oh, absolutely. And I think that, even then from that speech, we have made so many strides and so many foundations. And, we're talking about, stuff that's in theory right now that can potentially make it so that a trip to Mars will not be a few months trip, or something that can be done in a few weeks or so. And it's, who knows what the possibility is. We're no longer saying the sky's the limit anymore when we're talking about possibility here, because we are talking literally in the sky.
There's a science fiction book I read called Pandora's Star by Peter F. Hamilton. And it starts out with the scene with like the first human exploration trip going to Mars. But these Stanford students, taking the traditional approach of like launching a rocket and landing it, but these Stanford students have figured out how to create like a wormhole. And so they like actually arrive on Mars before them, and they're like, kind of like trolling the, the astronauts. So it took them months to get there, but then they just walked back. And that was the end of like.
That would be so true.
spacecraft.
Spending this entire time like prepping this mission to go for this long space duration, and then you just see people already there first. It's like, oh yeah, we just walked out here.
Yeah, we just thought we wanted to see the first landing. You know?
Do you guys want to ride back?
That's exactly how it turned out.
That's amazing. And who knows? Maybe we'll figure out something like that. It's an absolutely unknown endeavor right now of where we can push the limits of humanity and our knowledge of how to, explore the cosmos. So honestly, it's exciting. It's that like it brings out the best of people, the imagination of what could be. And I think that kind of eagerness and that it kind of embraces the childhood wonder that we've always had, that this is unknown to everyone, so who knows what's going to come from it.
And if you could take a trip to space, would you?
Oh, absolutely, in a heartbeat.
How far would you go?
How far would I go? I don't know, whatever the limit is. If I was to say a stop that I would like to make, it would definitely be to the Jovian planets myself. I would love to see, because one of my favorite celestial bodies is Europa, and being able to see that with my own eye, I think would be very akin to seeing the Grand Canyon for the first time.
Wow.
Yeah.
Do you think you'll get a chance to travel in space in your lifetime?
That's a good question. I don't think so.
You don't think so?
I don't know. If something miraculously, as far as a leap in technology has occurred, there is a good possibility. I know that a lot of private companies currently today are really trying to create a repetition of space flight right now, which is important. Having repetition in the process, ensures that we can make this a regular process, go and go and go. But at the end of the day, it's still quite expensive for leisure travel at this moment in time, and I'm not sure if it's going to change for the next 20 to 30 years. Maybe it will, and if there's a big breakthrough in technology, then yeah, it could happen. I will never count it out, but where things stand right now, it's highly unlikely.
That makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Morgan, thank you so much for your time. It's a pleasure to get to talk to you and I get to
Absolutely.
explore these topics.
Absolutely, I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.